welcome back to Reactivity TV. I'm Amy Albero, and I'm a licensed therapist.
I am Chris. I'm not a licensed therapist, but what I am is a finance guy, a real finance guy, unlike Grant. I'm also not something other than a therapist as well. And that is a pushover. Also, unlike Grant.
Oof.
Before we get too deep into it, okay, I just need to say what every person is thinking who's watching this franchise. This was unequivocally the worst episode of any show within this franchise that I have ever seen. This was an atrocious episode. Full stop. But before we go too deep, tell the good people why we're here.
Oh boy. Well, we are here tonight talking about Grant's season 29 of The Bachelor, episode 3. And, I guess Chris clearly has a lot of opinions, so hopefully I get a few of mine in. But before we get into all of that, please be sure to hit the like button at the bottom of this video. And also don't forget to subscribe. We love our growing community. Subscribe, get active in those comments. Let's see how many of you agree with Chris tonight. I'd love to hear your responses to what he's about to unleash on us.
And please also make sure to hit the bell icon so that you're alerted anytime we post new content to the channel. And can I just point out, while we're ranting on stuff, I see the analytics. So many of you watch all the episodes but do not subscribe. Don't do that to us. Subscribers are important. That's how YouTube knows that we're worth, showing to other people. So if you come here every week, you watch our content, please give us that. Give us that. It's just a little button. Just hit that little button right there for us.
Little
okay?
Tap.
A little tap, 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 taparoo. All right. So let's just get some opening thoughts out of the way. Okay. My opening thought is, remember 3 weeks ago, more innocent times, when we looked at the preview list of the women and we made our the women of the Bachelor season 29 preview episode, and we said to ourselves, hey, you know what? It's skewing a little bit of an older cast. I think we might get a little bit of maturity. And then we had limos, and limos were a little more muted, a little more mature. And we were like, oh, this could be a really good season of young ladies. We were wrong.
What's the opposite of a young lady?
What
are we getting?
We're watching. This is children. This is a cast of overly emotional children. It's hard to watch, but it is less hard to watch than Grant fumbling his way through this season at this point.
Yeah, I've been known to say, I've said it on this season so far, that there is a dose of drama, and there's something about like some of these like overly dramatic tears on TV that can be entertaining, but this week felt so exhausting. And yeah, I don't really know what I'm watching. I spent most of this episode just trying to figure out what was going on, trying to understand their reactions, trying to understand Grant. Like this was a tough watch for me for different reasons than you, I'm sure, but this was tough. This was a letdown.
Yeah.
And I think, like, to use a therapeutic term, I think in some ways there was a like parallel process going on, that the kind of letdown and disappointment that we were feeling was probably very parallel to what the cast was feeling too, with all of the disruptions in dates, the crappiness of dates, all of that stuff. Like, it was just such a big bummer. And I think they felt that way too. And we felt that way also as viewers.
Okay, so let's bring some happiness to this podcast real quick, and let's just go to good date, bad date, shall we?
Is that what you think is going to bring happiness? These dates, talking about them, or you just
no? But I enjoy a good date, bad date segment.
Okay.
There's just
fair.
something about this segment that warms me. Warms my innards.
Okay.
So taking them in order, we start off with the finance date. So they talk a little bit about, Grant being a finance bro. And so he kind of wants to have this whole like class where he's going to teach them about finance. And they bring in somebody from, Shark Tank or whatever it is. And some comedian who no one understood why she's there. And the whole goal of this is to I guess, get to know people with some questions and earn some grant bucks. And these, grant bucks are, whoever gets the most of them. The problem with the date fundamentally is that there are no like rules and nothing really makes a lot of sense about how you earn them or why. So all that aside for a second, if we just look at it from the perspective of you are having a third party ask you a bunch of questions that are vaguely tangentially financial related, and you have the option of trying to treat it like a trivia game to earn points, or do what kind of Bailey did and do more
Play to
silly
your
answers.
audience. Yeah.
Play to your audience and maybe show a different side of you. That's sort of what your kind of options are here. Oh boy, as a date, this I I don't hate this as a theory date as much as I hated it in practice. I
Hmm.
thought
I'm
this
with you.
in theory, this is not a terrible idea. The
Hmm.
execution was horrible, but let's separate how the show executed it for the sake of this segment. And I will say that it gave them an opportunity to show that the people have an option to show and lean into whatever they want to do. You want to go serious, you go serious. You better believe I'm answering every one of those questions exactly what the answers are, right? And but other people like Bailey leaned into the more silly side, right? And so I do think this is a good way to demonstrate personality in sort of a low key event that can be a little bit fun. So I don't hate it.
Yeah, I'm with you. In theory, like I was kind of excited to talk to you about this date because we've talked about on this podcast, on other podcasts that you've been guests on, um, like the importance of talking about finance related topics in dating. And so I like what a very creative way to kind of get the answers that you might need to see if you relate to money, finances, budgeting, saving, etc., the same, than to have a third party intervene to make it essentially not you asking the question, and so I thought like, okay, this is great. Like I would have loved to. Some of the questions were fine. I would have loved to have had a credit score question. I would have loved to have them ask like actual questions about like debt to income ratio, like that kind of stuff. Like explain that
Mm-hmm.
to me, but whatever. Um, and I hear your point about yes, people got to take it in whatever way they wanted to, which I think again, if Grant is saying finances is something that's very important to him, so I would think that he would be evaluating people based on their more intentional responses to the questions rather than the jokey, silly responses to the questions. The flaw of this date was he wasn't evaluating their answers. Anyway, all of
Mm-hmm.
this to say, in theory,
Well,
I think
well,
it's a
he
great
he
date.
may have been evaluating their answers. He just wasn't the
Oh,
one giving the grant
yes,
bucks.
giving the grant bucks. Yes, that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fair, totally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as a concept, I think it's a fantastic date.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it could work in a group setting. I think it could work one on one. I love it as a concept, but yes, I'm with you. In practice, did not like it. Did not like it at
Yeah.
all.
So you hit on some really important things in what you were saying. The first is the questions were wrong. Right.
Hmm.
There are so many ways. So we did in your wellness podcast. I came on one time, and you and Catherine were asking me about talking and communicating about finance and how to ask questions. And one of the questions Catherine had asked was like, these feel like really difficult questions to ask and not seem like you're prying and stuff like that. Things like, like, how much debt are you coming into the relationship with? Are you
Hmm.
loaded down with $300,000 worth of debt, or you got none, right? Type thing. Do you have any assets? Things like that, right? And so this is a great way to have those conversations where a third party is asking the questions. And one, it tells you if they never know the answers to any questions, and it tells you that they are really financially illiterate, which is a
Hmm.
good piece of information, right?
Sure.
Me, as being somebody who came from the finance world, like I actually don't care if my partner is financially literate. All I care about, because I'm going to carry the load of that no matter what, right? So I don't necessarily care that she's financially literate, but I do want to know if she's got 97 credit cards that are maxed out, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So there's a way to sort of pull out some of that information through this
Hmm.
date in a really meaningful way where if it's a carefully curated list of things designed for people to get to know each other on that level, then it
Right.
really works. But they were playing to an audience, so they wanted to hear more about plugs than they wanted to hear about people's credit scores. Unfortunately,
Right.
well,
Right. Yeah.
fortunately and unfortunately.
Right. The questions we got were the last time your credit card was declined, how
Great
much
question.
how much do you I thought the first couple questions were okay.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you expect your fiance to spend on an engagement ring? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then a risque purchase, what define what an asset is and what does ATM stand for. So like it started okay. And then it got like obviously a little bit more silly, but yeah, the questions
Mm-hmm.
could have been more intentional. Like to your point, do you own it? What assets do you own?
Mm-hmm.
That might have been uh
But even
relevant.
leading into some of the silly questions, like take the what was your most risque purchase?
Purchase.
You can turn this around and say, what is the thing that you knowingly purchase or knowingly spend money on, knowing that it's a bad use of your money, but
Hmm.
it's just something that you just can't live without or don't want to live without,
Like your
or
daily
what
Starbucks or something. Yeah.
yeah, something like that. Or even like what's the largest, like what's like a medium to big ticket item, something in like the thousands of dollars or more item that you viewed as your least wise purchase in hindsight. That
Mm-hmm.
maybe like asset, like what did you do in the moment that you thought was a good purchase, but turned out, with the wisdom of a few extra years, you realize like, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Those are great questions.
Yeah, they're writers, if you're listening, we've got some ideas for you for if you do this again. But again,
Yeah.
in concept, I thought this was great, as we both said. In practice and execution, was a bummer. So I don't know. I'm gonna cut the baby in half and give it a C.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Poor execution of a great idea.
All right.
Yep.
Next, we travel in a private jet to Las Vegas, where they do some sort of bungee jumping thing and then have dinner on a wet rooftop.
So I like this date. And the reason I like this date is because you are in a jet, one on one, tons of private time, right? You then go and you're doing a one on one activity where, Grant gets to show, how he will be, a protector, and how he is going to comfort her and how he's going to show up for her when she's nervous. And you also get to see the other parties, how they can roll with tough situations and things that are going to cause anxiety and things of that nature. And to me, I think all of that gets demonstrated here in this date. And then you go off and you have a nice little dinner. I historically hate we're going to go have dinner inside a pool, but like the fact is it's still just a dinner where you have more one-on-one alone time. So
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a solid B plus type of date, maybe even into the A minus. That
Hmm.
being said, it is not for everybody. I know that this date is your personal hell. And so you would never, ever, ever rappel off that building. And so it's just not going to work. But if you think that there's a reasonable shot that both parties are willing to jump, I think it's a solid B plus.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I think I'd be fine with just the private jet date. Get me a private jet. I mean, it would be very not economical and very unwise for, the planet to just cruise around on a private jet for the afternoon, but I'd be fine with that alone. I think that's kind of just a cool date. But yeah, there are lots of built-in moments and opportunities for one-on-one time, for connection building, and I think that's what makes this date a good date. Um, but from my personal perspective, very little of this is actually of interest to me, as you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
like the rappelling, bungee jumping. No, I don't really want to take my shoes off and get my feet wet. Um, on a when I put time into a full outfit, including the shoes, like that kind of thing, like this little things like that, I'd be like, this is just like too much, like unnecessary, like too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, but I think it's a fine date. I think it's fine. I think it's a B for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So then we move on to dog shelter volunteering.
Hmm.
Um, okay, I got maybe a crazy take on this that we can get in more deeply later. But to me, this was a proxy for judging how somebody is in a nurturing type of environment, right? Grant continually talks about how he wants a mother to his children, right? And
You're gonna steal my point.
no, 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 no. All I'm saying is, it's very clear to me that yes, he likes dogs. Why is he a dog person instead of a cat person? Because dogs are basically just children, right? Like that's how they are treated in our society. Which I have certain levels of complaints with that. Like a dog is not a substitute for a child. You shouldn't bring it to my house without asking permission, like you would your child. It's still a dog. Please ask permission before bringing him over. But that being said, um, I think this is another way to see how somebody acts in a maternal setting. You're donating and volunteering your time to a dog shelter. The dog is sort of a proxy representation of a child, and see how warm and loving they are in this environment. If you are Grant and that is what you care about, I think that this is a date that you are subtly you're finding out some information about somebody without them really realizing what you're trying to tease out from them. And for that, I think it's a very slick date. But me being a cat person instead of a dog person, not for me. This is not a
Hmm.
date that I'm going on, but I respect what Grant and production did here.
Yeah, listen, I thought this was a good date. I think this could have been a great one-on-one date. I think it worked really well as a very small group date. Um, for all of the reasons that you just gave. It also shows like the ability to get your hands dirty in a sense, and like do the like less glamorous, but still realistic. It's not like shoveling up like poop from a
Yeah.
stable kind of thing. Like these are
Mhm.
actual things that you would do in real life. And so I think that was good to see. And I think again, Grant has an opportunity to put his money where his mouth is and say, like, this is what's important to me. It seemed like he was genuine in the way that he engaged with the dogs and taking care of them. Like it wasn't just something that he says. And I said this repeatedly while watching this episode, that Grant has not buried the lead. He is actively seeking a wife and mother for his children. And so I totally agree with you that this this was this was on purpose. This date was on purpose.
Mhm. Yep. Should we move over to the cold open and sort of the introduction to the episode?
Oh God, you really have a lot to say, don't you? I was gonna skip right over that part, but yeah, why
Oh
don't we
no,
start
I
with the
mean, I
with the
need to
cold
talk
open?
about. Okay, well, okay. So first off, they bait and switch us because they make it seem like Grant is finally showing some backbone, and that is all a lie. This episode, he does not have a spine in this episode. But they open with the cold open where I was like hopeful. I'm like, oh, it looks like he's throwing down. Like you are questioning my character and my integrity, and as somebody who actually like I am very sympathetic to that because I will respond very forcefully when I feel like my character is thrown into question. But it just it doesn't actually manifest in the episode. But then from there, what do we move on to? One of my biggest pet peeves. You got all the girls in the mansion talking about girl math. Like, can we stop giving any sort of time and air to girl math? You make women look stupid,
I
and
agree.
they're not stupid. We
I
all
agree.
understand that this is, yeah. I hate the whole thing because one, like, it, it's not cute, right? Guys don't find this cute, and it just makes girls look stupid. So, like, let's just stop it. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I know you've heard me go on rants about this before. I think, well, when you put girl in front of anything, it automatically, let's use the word of the night, belittles women, and yeah, it completely robs us of any opportunity to feel empowered around money, to use our intelligence as it comes to money and finances, makes us look really just irresponsible and immature. Like, why do we do this? I truly don't understand why this is such a trope. It's very irksome to me.
Yeah, and this is a modern trope too, because if you think about back to more traditional times, you go back 40, 50 years, before women really entered the workforce, what we actually would see is that the majority of relationships, the man would go out and earn the money, and the woman would actually basically be the home bookkeeper and accountant.
Mhm.
She would pay all the bills. She carried that financial aspect. Women were predominantly in most relationships, the driver of the finances, of how they got spent on all the bills for literally centuries, right?
Mhm.
And unless the man happened to be in the finance field, right? That was about the only time you ever saw the man really controlling the home finances. So, like, I
Mhm.
don't want to hear all this girl math nonsense. I hate like the belittling, to use the word you used, of women's capability in finance. Like, we've got literally centuries where they were the
Yeah.
ones who controlled the purse strings of the house. We know that they can do it. Let's stop making them look
Yeah,
stupid already.
let's not set ourselves back any further than we are. Like this is
Technically, you're
this
setting yourself forward. If you set yourself back, you'd be back to controlling the finances. This is modernity's problem. This isn't the past problem. This is the problem with modernity.
fair. Yeah. So yeah, big pet peeve with that one.
Yep.
I will say not to undermine your point by any means, but that the girl math conversation actually happened after the group date intro because they were talking about uh like the date had like finance related stuff in the topic. So that also what made it even more bothersome is they're talking about how Grant values, like, he's a finance guy, he's a trader, he values money and investing, and then they go into this girl math conversation, and it's like, and so that it just doubles down on how frustrating it was to hear them talk about this. Like, on the one hand, you
Mm-hmm.
recognize that this is something that's important to this man that you're considering, dating, and then you're taking yourself out of a capable position, or like to be a good partner to him in any way. Like, I don't get it. I truly
Mm-hmm.
don't.
Yep, I'm with you 100%. So yeah, look, Jesse comes in right at the start of the episode and says group date is happening right now. There's 2 one-on-one dates expected, and then there's a group date. And so everybody else is going on the group date. Beverly and Karolina are supposed to be the 2 one-on-one dates at the start of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, first off, they say that this is going to be he's going to teach finance. At no point in this date does he teach finance. Turns into what we already talked about in Good Date, Bad Date. It turns into this trivia sort of game where people get to be silly. I don't really understand why the Shark Tank guy was there. He was not prominent in the episode. The comedian Hannah was,
Hannah Burner.
yeah, I don't know who she is. I don't really understand why she was there. I don't think she was really additive at all.
Hannah Burner is very well known to like a particular person. Like, she's a Bravo celebrity. She has her own podcast. She was part of Betches for a while.
Mm,
She's a comedian. So, like, if you know her, if you're familiar, like, I'm familiar with her. I've been following her for
mm,
years, and so I imagine someone like Bailey also is very aware of who she is, and
mm-hmm.
can, as she played to her sense of humor and trying to understand her audience. And so,
Yeah.
like, she's quite widely known, Hannah Burner.
Gotcha. Yeah, not somebody who would show up in my circles, and
No,
probably
no,
not
I don't
somebody I
think
would
so.
follow. Yeah. So let's talk about Bailey here for a second, because we talked. She said, "I'm playing this strategy to earn the most bucks," right? But was that the right strategy? Now, theoretically, right, or not theoretically, practically speaking, she accomplished what she thought was her goal: earn the most bucks, get some extra one-on-one time with Grant. That was, objective accomplished. My question to you is, was that actually a smart strategy? Because what she sacrificed here was actually giving Grant information that he can use to build a connection with her.
Okay. So I think the first part of the strategy was excellent. Get the Grant Bucks to get the time. Grant is not the one that's going to be, doling out the bucks. So, like, good on you. You, as you said, achieved the objective. Then she squandered the time. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the thing that we hear Grant say repeatedly when it comes to Bailey is, I know that we can be silly together, but can we ever be serious? And he says that later about someone else as well,
Mm-hmm.
which we'll get to. And so she just can't stop using humor and silliness and seeing that as her only way to connect. And that's a miss for Grant. I mean, she doesn't get a rose at the end. No surprise there. And so, like, I wish that she had taken the opportunity to say, "Hey, I basically I did what I needed to do to get here. Let's have a little bit of a serious talk. I know this is important to you. What do you want to know? Like, what can I tell you?" And then, kind of get into whatever else. Like, I would have pivoted, and she just never pivoted at any opportunity that she had throughout her short time on the season. Never gave another side of herself, and this was a really good opportunity to do it that she didn't take.
So I agree with everything you said, and I've got one point to add, and
Okay.
that is I do not believe that she is a naturally silly person. The silliness feels like an inauthentic mask, and
Mhm.
that's the problem. If she was genuinely a silly person, I would be a little bit more sympathetic because then at least she could make the argument that this is, in fact, who I am and get used to me. But the truth is, she feels like she is playing to her influencer crowd and that everything that she's presenting is kind of fake
Mhm.
fronts and masks. And that I think is the problem here. I
Yeah.
agree she needed
It's
to pivot
performative.
and she needed to pivot to something authentic. And I don't care if that authentic it would have been a different version of silliness. Just give me something authentic. And she could never be authentic. And that was the problem. That was
Mhm.
one of many problems with Bailey. So yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. And there's no surprise that she does not make it through this episode.
But then we have what feels like a very big contradiction, because then we see Parisa get time, and she uses her time to play Chubby Bunny with Grant. And not only is Grant and as she's doing this, I'm like, oh God, here we go again. Another gimmick with Parisa. And we just heard Grant say
But
he
it's
wants
not
to
a
see.
gimmick. That's the
Yeah,
difference. Bailey, it is inauthentic. This
this
is
is who she
authentically
is.
who
Yeah.
Parisa is. Yeah,
And
that's the
and
difference.
and it clearly won out. Like, he was actually able to laugh and have a good time, and had a lot of fun, and he felt like this was connection building. And so, like, seeing the juxtaposition of these two attempts at silliness and seeing what played and what didn't, and Parisa's must have very much played because she got the rose for the evening. But I think, yeah, seeing them back to back was very interesting, and seeing Grant's
Mhm.
reaction to both women was very interesting.
Say what you want about Parisa, right? But she is authentic to herself. This is who she is.
Yeah. She's
A
very
little,
consistent too.
yes, yeah. Not my cup of tea. Not my piece of pie. But you know what? You can never say that she's not genuine. And there's going to be somebody out there who's digging this girl. It's not going to be Grant at the end of the day. I can promise you that for a lot of reasons. But
Mhm.
you know what? You know, give her a rose, let her hang out. She's fun at least. At least I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
these other girls, they're going to trauma dump on me. These other girls, they're going to start some drama. You know what? Parisa's going to walk in there and she's going to make me laugh every time. A
Mhm,
little bit of
mhm,
levity and
mhm.
some light in the darkness at times
Yeah.
has
I've
value.
heard, and we've talked about this, like, I've heard previous, leads talk about, kind of keeping people like, Parisa around, because it is such a stressful experience. And, like, and I'm sure they can build a nice friendship, and they have a good, like, connection, but having people like her around, like, make this very stressful experience more enjoyable. And so I think they're like a utility player for that
Mhm.
reason.
See, if I'm Parisa here, the way that the strategy that I'm playing, I know that Grant is an alpha male, right? Who's looking for a traditional marriage and mother to his children, right? She's already demonstrated with her crazy PowerPoint that she can, she's got some skills up in there that she can use to help to facilitate his career and stuff like that, right? And she can make him laugh and be silly. So like the angle I'm playing if I'm Parisa is I am going to be your biggest cheerleader and I am going to be your support structure. And that's the angle that she plays. And
Mm.
she is uniquely qualified, you know, outside of maybe one or two others in this entire season uniquely qualified to play that strategy.
Yeah.
And I think she could play it better than the other one or two people who kind of have that strategy open to them. So if I'm her, that's the angle I'm taking. Now,
No, I think that you're so right. And again, we hear about that a little later in the episode, like what he's looking for. And I think it is a huge part of it is that, like that kind of supportive validation. But he's also looking for a lot of affection. He's clearly a physical touch guy. We've heard him say that. We see him like that. They just don't have chemistry in that way,
mhm,
at least
sure,
yet.
yeah,
And so like I think that's the downfall. Like if they were kissing as well as laughing, I could see her lean into it a bit more as you're saying. It would be a great strategy, but I don't see it happening.
yeah. Now, I agree with you, but that to me is the only strategy that gives her a fighting shot in this competition.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yep.
Um as much as I don't want to, I think we need to talk about Zoe.
My opinions of Zoe have done a complete 180. But what was your take on her events of this date?
Well, I'll do a little bit of a recap so that we can talk through it. So everyone is happy and they're having a good time. I wrote like good vibes all around. Everybody's having fun. And then Zoe starts to then talk about how she's not in her element, how she feels like she's drowning, how everyone is connected and bubbly, and that's like not her. She starts crying, and that's what starts to like create this spiral. And Serafina in her in the moment interview, her ITM, points out that there's what of this discrepancy this week. Last week, she was the one who was monopolizing the date, having a grand old time, didn't really care about anybody else's experience, and now here she is feeling kind of like left out and not feeling good. And Allie Joe is also annoyed, but then Zoe takes on ultimate victimhood by feeling like she's being now targeted. Serafina did make a comment about her dress. It was an observation, maybe, but uh, then Zoe takes it incredibly personally. What have I done to anyone here? And then Grant deserves to know, and he should not be duped. And then brings all of this nothing, quite frankly, to Grant.
Yeah, a couple quick points that I want to make. And again, as a man, maybe I just don't understand. But like Serafina said, that's a short dress.
That's the
Okay.
shortest dress I've ever seen. Maybe it might have been
Yeah.
the comment.
Okay. But like, why is that offensive? Like, it just felt like Zoe was looking for a fight to pick here because, like, maybe I don't understand why that's offensive, but like,
I mean, it's
one,
like
it wasn't that short a dress. And
no, I
two,
don't think so
even if it,
either.
yeah, go ahead.
I think it was like a way to say it's a slutty dress or something like that. Like
Yeah, but
so
all of them have their chests hanging out, and they're
I
all
know.
wearing short dresses. They all have
I know.
high
Well,
high
and so I think
sides.
it
Like,
showed it was I'm not saying it was a high character moment for Serafina either, but it was the reaction was incredibly disproportionate for Zoe. But she was
yeah, and
already
I think
feeling so vulnerable. She was already feeling very isolated. She was already feeling not included. And so she just took this one thing and it just unraveled her.
yeah, I mean, I think this is a demonstration of lack of maturity on
Mm-hmm.
Zoe's part, also on Serafina's part. Like, just and now again, I'm a little bit more sympathetic to Serafina because I make observations all the time, but like that are relatively what I think are relatively innocuous observations, and sometimes people will take offense to them in ways that I don't expect them to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I can be a little sympathetic because that's a flaw I have as well. That being said, I have no sympathy for Zoe here. That this just even this felt like you were trying to pick a fight, and then to
Mm-hmm.
bring this to Grant, um, I it was so frustrating.
Well,
But
what she did, this also happened twice this episode. Absolutely infuriating. She says people are saying mean things, but I'm not going to say who.
mhm.
I'm not going to say who, but people are. And he's trying to say, like, well, tell me who. If someone's hurting your feelings, I want to know so I can like help or whatever. And she's saying, well, I don't want to say. And that I also felt like was incredibly manipulative. But
And
Grant
Grant just bought it. Just
just ate it
once
up.
again. Oh yeah. Well, here's the problem: is like if I'm sitting on that couch and a girl comes to me and says, I feel like bullied or I feel belittled. And I said, okay, what was the comment? And a woman said to me, somebody said that my dress was the shortest dress they'd ever seen. I would say, get out, go home. If that's literally going to be the thing that sets you off, like, I, like you're going to be dealing with children that are going to be doing all kinds of stupid, crazy things. You're going to be dealing with other parents that are going to be nasty and problematic, right? You know, like your skin is so unbelievably thin, and your resilience is effectively non-existent, right? I'm sorry. That is not somebody that I want. I want my kids to be strong and to be resilient. And Grant seems to be the type of person who wants a more traditional situation where you are going to raise resilient children, not soft children. Zoe has demonstrated that she herself is non resilient and very soft. And thus, that is not somebody I suspect Grant is going to want to have as a mother of his children.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you. Again, we cannot state enough that Grant is dating with the intention of finding a wife and a mother for his children. So seeing most things through that lens and trying to like extrapolate out how would this woman fit into how I view what I want to create in a family, I think makes a ton of sense. But I think in this moment, right? Like he's not thinking with his wisest mind.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely has a rescue tendency about him, and he just gets so reactive and loses his sense of rationality and just goes in
Asks
to
no
save.
questions,
Yep.
wants no validation, just
Yep.
like he hears the problem that you present, and I'm going straight into
Yeah.
protective mode. And like, look at, I am sympathetic to that because he wants to be a provider, he wants
Hmm.
to be a protector, and like I understand that that's where he's coming from, and I'm sympathetic to it. But the problem is you're not asking questions to
Hmm.
see if any of this stuff that you are
Hmm.
protecting her from is a real threat.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Yeah, I
so thus
agree.
he's becoming very easily manipulated.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think as a viewer, it's frustrating to watch. As a therapist, I have to be curious, right? Like the the way that we react and respond, particularly in relationships and interpersonally, relates a lot to our upbringing and kind of what we've learned about how to engage in childhood. And so I'd be curious about like the function of this, like why he continually puts himself in this position to be the protector and the savior beyond what you often remind us is like a biological tendency of a man, and it feels different than that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm curious about that, and I wonder if we'll get a little bit more insight into that as the season progresses.
So we have gone really deep on this first date. So anything else you want to talk about it before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, we already said that Parisa gets the group date rose. Grant
Mm-hmm.
does. Oh, Grant closes. He sort of like has this mic drop moment that rattles the house for the rest of the week, where he basically addresses the lack of kindness in the group, the belittling going on in the house. Everyone is confused, and Zoe essentially, they all realize like, oh, it's Zoe kind of
Yeah.
starting shit,
Well,
and
so
this
let's
just unravels them.
so let's do 10 seconds on this. So here's the thing. I understand what he was doing. I would have made the exact same mistake that he made, not realizing that was a huge mistake. At his age, I would have made that mistake. But make no mistake, he handled that awfully. It was
Mm-hmm.
just absolutely awful. So what he was doing here, right? As a man, what he was basically saying is, I have heard a rumor. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's false. I don't really care. But what I'm telling you all is that I just want everyone to treat everyone with kindness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'm saying is please be kind to one another. And there's no problem, right? And that's what he was trying to convey. There's no problem yet, right? I don't know if anything's true or false, but please just be kind to one another. And that's it. And every guy like if they were on the opposite end, if the genders were reversed, every guy would be like, okay, yeah, it means don't rock any boats from here on out. But to the women, this was like lighting a match, because now they need to, now there's concern, now there's a problem, now they have to start digging. And I'm not a female, so I'm not going to attempt to really get into the mind and understand why this is happening. But I do know at my age that this is going to happen, right? At 30, I'm not sure that I would have known this, and I would have made the same mistake Grant made. Grant thought he was putting an end to it, thought he was giving an uplifting statement of be kind to one another and we have no problems, let's all move forward happily. But the women, and this is actually something really fascinating when you look at psychology between the genders. And I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast in the past. Men, biologically speaking, are forward looking. Women are backwards looking. And so what happens is, Grant, in that forward looking, is saying, I'm setting the tone for what I want the future to be. But because women tend to look backwards, they now can't, they have to figure out why this happened. So there was this really fascinating kind of survey poll that happened. I've talked about it in the podcast in the past, where they stuck 100 men and 100 women in a room, and they told them they were going to be there for 10 minutes, and they left them in the room for 4 hours. And then they asked them all what you were thinking about when you were in there. And the men all said the same thing, basically sports, stuff like that, like stupid stuff, right? All of the women came back and said, I was reliving conversations that I had with other people in the past, and basically like relitigating and re-arguing old conversations. To a man, that sounds insane. I've never relitigated an argument in my mind ever, right?
That sounds insane to me.
Oh yeah, but to be clear, like I will think about future conversations I'm going to have, and think about the tactics somebody might use to get one up on me, and I might prepare in my mind some alternative approaches and some pivots and stuff like that on how I'm going to attack the conversation. But once a conversation's done, I'm not relitigating that. Right? I might sit down and think about where did I go right, where did I go wrong, but like, yeah. And so this is a classic example of differences between genders, and Grant just does not know that he just lit the keg on fire, basically,
Yeah, and he certainly did. He really did. Yeah. Let's move on to the one-on-one date with Karolina.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's a ton of things interesting here to talk about. She's very good at flirting. She understands how to flirt. And I think that is the takeaway for the entire Jet portion of the date. The thing I'll say about the rappelling, jumping off the 800-foot tower, is when you juxtapose that against like Jen and Sam's date in her season, you actually saw Grant like demonstrate what we wish Sam had demonstrated. The big difference here is that Karolina was rearing to go. She was ready to jump off that, whereas Jen was having anxiety. So it was a little bit of a like anticlimactic, because like he didn't necessarily need to console her, but he was trying really hard to play that part. So I think
she played that part for him. He seemed more nervous than she did.
Well, I wonder if he was playing it up a little bit to feel sensitive. They both, to me, they both seemed like they were ready to jump off that. Like there was like, they both felt like, oh yeah, no, they're going, and they go twice. The fact that they went twice tells you, no, they were both ready to go, I think. But beyond that, I mean, not much to say. When we get to the dinner, I was a little disappointed. I was thinking back to the last Paradise season, and I was really hoping somebody was taking a dip. Did not happen. The big thing that gets discussed here is that she reveals that she has been diagnosed with epilepsy. And this is obviously a big piece of her life. And she discusses how she has to handle that and kind of what it's meant. That is a legitimate thing that a partner needs to be aware of. I'm not an expert in epilepsy, so I don't actually know how impactful that is to the day-to-day life of somebody. So, certainly somebody in the comments, if you know more about it, definitely share what you know. But that seems like something meaningful to share. I didn't love Grant's reaction here. it didn't feel authentic and genuine to me. One of the problems is what I appreciated was he did a lot of active listening here, which is something that you had to teach me how to do for many years. And I saw the effort at active listening. What I appreciated was after she dropped all of that on him, he asked to take a beat. He said, "Let me collect my
Mhm.
thoughts for a second." I thought
Yeah,
that
let
was
me
a good
gather
call.
myself.
Yes, I thought that was a good call, um, because it's a lot to process there, right? Um, where I don't like his response is that his body language and his tone and his words all felt incongruent. They don't
Mhm.
feel like they matched each other. And I'm not saying he wasn't genuine and
Mhm.
authentic. I don't know. Like the whole thing just felt muddled to me, and I was having a hard time, reading it.
Y Yeah, yeah, no, I hear you. I think he was this is a this was she was emotional. This is, a meaningful piece of information to know, to learn. I think he was trying to figure out, like, what is the right thing to say here, and that's what the
Felt
discomfort is,
very
and then
strategic.
and then he sort of said some placating words like, "If we get married, I'll put you first, yada yada." But I think like I think it would have been reasonable for him to ask her more questions about like, you're telling me that this impacts your life. You're telling me that it's important that a partner knows about this. Like tell me more. Like tell me more about how what this looks like in your life. What would a good partner need to do? What do you need from them? Like what basically like what would our life look like? And it felt, I don't know if he asked those questions.
Mhm.
I'm assuming not. But if you're trying to get a sense, both of you are trying to get a sense of, is this my person? Can this person hang in my day-to-day life? Can I be the person for her? You're going to want to ask those questions, but I don't think that he felt like he could. um, and that I think was a missed opportunity. I hope that they do get time to talk about that some more if they do continue on together. So
And
that
production
was,
even gave him an in because you had said it when we were watching it. Like she just jumped off a building. Like, isn't that a concern? Like that is kind of the in where it's like, well, like, were you at greater risk by jumping off the building? Like that's a nice, easy,
yeah.
soft way into
Or
the
even like
conversation to
you
start
you
asking
said, like,
more.
I actually don't know a whole lot about epilepsy. Like
Yeah.
tell me tell me more.
Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, like I don't know if this is a dumb question, but like jumping off the building, like, are you okay? Like
Yeah.
should I just, yeah, I wish I would have seen what we are talking about from Grant. What we hoped Grant would do is the definition of vulnerability. Putting
Mhm.
like taking a risk and putting yourself out there to ask like some of these questions, and then the vulnerability again of Karolina to share this information and to actually talk about it, not just like let me dump this information on you, but like let's have a conversation and a discussion about it. That's what
Mhm.
I would have liked to see. Again, I don't know what actually happened. We only know what was given to us. But yeah. The other thing I just wanted to note about this, again, Grant is one of the most intentional bachelors. He starts this conversation of what makes you feel like you're ready for marriage? Are you actually ready and why?
This was an awkward exchange, right?
Yes, because she had an agenda. Like she came
Yeah.
into the date knowing I want to tell him this thing, and so she tried to answer his like find a avenue to answer his question by also sharing what she needed to share. So she didn't
Yeah.
actually answer his question other than like
She used it as
I
an
I stick ar
intro.
what
Yeah.
her first answer was, "I stick around for people because I know how badly I want people to stick around for me." Doesn't tell me anything about your readiness for marriage. It tells me that you really wanna get married and find a partner, but yeah, nothing
Mhm.
about your readiness for marriage. So all of this to say, this was enough for Grant. Karolina did get the rose, and then we kind of move on to the next day.
Yeah, and Beverly apparently gets sick and leaves the show. Don't get a ton of
Mhm.
details. We just are told that she's not going to be returning. So we've got our first elimination. I'm just putting that down to a self elimination. And the date has to get reassigned. And it ends up becoming a 3-on-1 with Serafina, Dina, and Latia. The reason that they were the three that get the date was because that those are the three that Grant said most impressed him on the earlier group date.
Mhm.
Then we go to Natalie crying that she was not part of it. Again,
Yeah,
more
not
crying this
feeling
episode.
seen, feeling
Yep.
second best, yada yada.
Yep.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah. So, more crying. But the date itself, this was, I mean, this was a hard watch. It felt like an afterthought. It felt like production and the editors didn't even want to include this in the episode. It felt like they once Beverly was not going to be on the date, that this was a complete waste of time, and that's how everyone felt and how everyone treated it, except for the contestants themselves. Am I wrong, or is that how it felt to you?
I think the dates this season are just all across the board lackluster.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this definitely felt like, oh shoot, we've got to scramble at the last minute and like figure this out. So it felt a little phoned in.
Mm-hmm.
But as we talked about in Good Date, Bad Date, I actually thought the date itself was good. I liked the three women that he brought. And so I mean, there's not a whole lot to say except that each of them got some pretty solid one-on-one time.
Latia gets the dinner again because I'm assuming they had set up for a one-on-one dinner and they turned it into a three-on-one date. I don't know why they couldn't have just stuck two more chairs at the table. They're not allowed to eat anyway, so I don't know. But they never tell us why. They never tell us how Latia is picked.
Oh,
But
he said he picked Latia because she's beautiful, genuine, and has a nurturing spirit. Again, mother of mother of my
there's
children.
no ball being hidden here, right?
Yeah,
He is
no,
about the most transparent bachelor in the history of the franchise, right?
yeah. I
Um,
believe him. I believe him. He is. I believe it, Grant. Every week you tell us multiple times. I
he
believe
is
you.
on message,
Yeah.
right? So look, the date itself. There's a couple things that I'll note. Latia,
Hmm.
I she is not for me, but she has a remarkable capacity for really engaging in the conversation, looking like she's really paying attention, looking like she's really taking in the information you're giving, showing empathy, giving good responses,
Hmm.
um, you know, like just timing herself really well here. There's
Yeah.
something, there's something like there is something appealing with her.
I think that she's bubbly. I think that
Hmm.
she's um got such good energy. She literally radiates from the inside out. Like she's glowing. Like I imagine she's a light to be around. Just the way that she is. She's just kind of bubbly. Like even as they're having dinner and she's like spontaneously kissing him. Like I think that for what Grant is looking for, she's that kind of energy is probably very appealing to him. The thing that
Mhm.
will be curious to hear more about is in her intro package, episode 1, I believe she said she's Mormon. And so I don't
Mm.
know how that's all gonna come together, but just throwing that out there.
I actually think she's going to be top four. I think that she understands what Grant is looking for. I think that she's a very smart, very intelligent, woman. I think that she has a lot of characteristics and or can like present as if she has the characteristics that Grant is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that she has a good awareness of the moment, and good timing in terms of how to interact and respond within the moments. And
Mm-hmm.
those are not skills you can teach. Those
Mm-hmm.
are innate and intuitive skills. And so I think she's going to go far in this competition. I can understand if she does end up winning this. She's playing the game really well, is what I would
Mm-hmm.
say. Right?
Yeah, no, I think so, and it doesn't feel like she's playing the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it
She
does.
feels authentic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Every
she
time.
does. She feels genuine, authentic, and they have meaningful conversation. This is where you referenced this conversation earlier, where we learn a little bit more about Grant's parents. We learn a little bit more about the way he was mothered as well, and that's his impact on kind of what he's looking for in a partner,
Mm-hmm.
in a family. And then we learn a little bit more about Latia's background. You know, she shares about the death of her father, and kind of the support that she gets from her family. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then they FaceTime with her mother. And so
I
It's
really want to get your opinion on the FaceTime because the phrasing here is, I have a surprise for you. Let's FaceTime with your mother.
mhm,
Call back to Gary and Sandra.
mhm.
We were very critical of Gary in that moment. Are we critical of Grant in this moment?
Okay. The circumstances were incredibly different. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
Sandra missed her daughter's wedding to
Mm-hmm.
be on the Golden Bachelor. Okay. And the way that Gary put it wasn't, I have a surprise for you. There was an ick associated with it that I didn't like. It felt
Mm-hmm.
like a power play that I didn't like. Like he was granting her this favor. This felt really different. This felt like that felt like it was for Gary to be like good guy Gary. This
Mm-hmm.
felt like Grant saying, I've heard you say, Latia, how much your mom means to you, how much you miss her. Like phone also Golden Bachelor seemed like they had more access to their phones due to family obligations and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Bachelor, not at all. And so this really did feel like I am pulling strings so you could talk to your mom. And so it felt different to me. The vibe was different. The way it was given was different. The circumstances were different. I think they're not comparable at all.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask so that when the people in the comments call us hypocrites, we've already addressed why we're not hypocrites.
I also think, again, one of the things I'm really wondering is I think Grant really sees something serious in Latia,
Mm-hmm.
especially following this. And so I think
Yep.
that he's trying to get more information, so to speak. Like let me see her mother, let me meet her mother, like let me essentially and try to envision this a little bit more or like learn a little bit more about who this woman really is so I can further invest or not. And then he walks away from the date saying, after tonight, Latia could be my wife. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it was also strategic on Grant's part to like get a fuller picture because he is actually really interested in her.
So you know what this kind of reminded me of, and you just sort of touched on it a little bit. Um, I was supposed to meet your entire family at your cousin's
Graduation party or something.
graduation party, something like that. And you didn't want me to meet your mother for the first time with all these your whole family. So like the couple days before, you had me meet her very briefly on the front doorstep of her house for like 3 minutes just to say hi. This is the guy I'm dating. This is the guy I'm bringing to the graduation party. Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is sort of what it felt like to me, where he's like, look, the next time I'm going to see you, it's going to be an entire production. There's going to be
Mm-hmm.
cameras. There's going to be microphones. There's going to, everyone's going to, whatever. Like, here's a moment where you and I can just have a quick conversation where I don't have anybody in my ear. No one's sticking cameras in your faces. And we can just chat and you can just see each other for a couple of minutes. You know, I kind of liked it on that axis,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you talk about the fact, like, yeah, like let me, like, I kind of really like this girl. I see something with this girl. Let me just grab a 2 or 3 minute phone call with her mom just to see what future Latia looks like, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, that's a slick way to do it. And by the way, Latia did get the rose.
Oh yeah,
Shocker, I know.
obvious. Yeah.
Yep.
So then we move into the cocktail party, which we learn is going to be prom themed. Grant
Mm-hmm.
never went to his prom. We also, so all the women kind of get asked to prom. They get corsages. They have some guests that are invited, and they are some of our favorites from the Golden Bachelorette. We get
Some of
Gary.
the absolute most important person in the entire Jones season showed up tonight.
Go ahead,
My
we'll
boy
talk about him.
Jack.
Yep.
And you better believe he was explaining to everybody proper burger grilling form. And I still maintain correct. Keith was wrong.
You know what? Jack understands the assignment. He knows what we all want from him. He hits his beats at every turn. He's the one that says, like, let's party. He's grilling the burgers, giving the burger explanation. Like he's wearing the shiny suit. Like I'm obsessed.
He never disappoints.
He just
Never
nailed it.
disappoints.
He nailed it in such a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
So good on Jack.
Yep.
So while Prom is promming, we also get some insight from Karolina, who has been spiraling since she came home from her date. She's dealing with some
Mm-hmm.
jealousy, number one, feeling like I went on this date. We formed a bigger connection, and then the next day he takes three other women out for a date. I wish I never went on this date. Blah blah blah. Like, so she's getting anxious. She's feeling a little
Very,
possessive,
very dramatic.
jealous, very dramatic. And then right before we get into the prom, she says that she had an off-camera conversation with Rose, and Rose apparently told her that when in the previous week, when Grant was dancing with Karolina, that Grant told Rose that he was actually thinking about Rose. And that sent Karolina down a further spiral, which understandable, I'll say. If you did hear that, that could be very upsetting to hear. And so she's just, you see her like really having a hard time. So that's kind of in the backdrop of what's going on at prom, is we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing Karolina, kind of regress pretty significantly while prom is going on.
Yes. So there's a lot here, but I think the summary really is Karolina is overly dramatic and overly emotional. This is what the show is. You know what you signed up for. I know that doesn't necessarily make it easier in the moment, but like, come on, hold it together. You're getting roses, you're getting attention, you're getting way more attention than most of the other girls. He's already told you that you're safe and that he is very interested in you. And of the dates that have been presented, you got one of the best dates so far, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if moving over to the rose thing, one, I mean, you don't know Grant that well at this point, but like he does appear to be a high character guy, right? Like, so the first thing I would do is does Rose seem like a high character woman? Maybe. Does she seem like she's more of a high character woman than Grant is a high character man? I think that's a question. Like, I am in this situation. If somebody tells me something, then the first thing I'm doing is assessing the source, and then I'm
Yeah.
assessing the party in which it's about. And I'm making a judgment call about, based on what I've seen, what is more likely true here, right? And I just don't know how you come to the conclusion that Rose is telling the truth in this situation.
Yeah. Well, I think this whole thing is just bananas to me, honestly. But I can't help but think, why would Rose even tell Karolina this? You
Mm-hmm.
know, like if
Because Karolina is spiraling, it's going to get under her skin.
well, supposedly, per Rose, they were both spiraling and comparing notes. And I thought that Rose thought that Grant said this, so she shared this with Karolina. But again, why would you share it if you were going to stay, or if you were not going to both confront him together? Like, what was the point of telling him? I don't really understand. Or unless you were it was in an effort to unravel her or to hurt her feelings, or
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't understand. It didn't feel altruistic. I was she commiserating with Karolina about this and saying that her feelings were hurt? Then why share? You can share that with anybody else. Why share this with Karolina, the person that it would deeply offend? So like, the strategy behind what Rose was doing makes me question her overall. Like, I under
Mm-hmm.
what circumstances, with the things that played out in the way that they did, would you choose to tell Karolina?
Yes, I 100% agree. I can't pinpoint a strategy in which it's beneficial to her in any situation. So I agree. Don't understand why.
Right.
Um, True or not, why would you? I can't think of a reason why you'd make it up and say it. I can't understand a reason why, even if you truly believe that he said that, you'd say it. None of it makes any
Yeah,
sense.
it just makes absolutely no sense to me. Like, I again, I'm trying to turn it around in my brain and like trying to again figure out why. And I I don't. It's either with impure intentions
Mm-hmm.
to rattle Karolina. If it were altruistic intentions, then again, you would confront him together or you would leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
because if if it's bothering you enough to share to someone else, then that's a question about this person's character that you have, in which case then why are you still there, so
Yeah.
like I makes no sense to me. All
Mm-hmm.
of this to say, Karolina initially confronts Grant with this and says, someone, this was the most fascinating part of the
This
episode.
was another Zoe situation. I don't want
Another,
to say who. Yeah.
you said to someone that you were thinking of someone while dancing with me. And then he says, well, hold up, that's a lie. And that's a judge on my character. Who was it? If I guess, will you tell me? First, the three names he gives in order. Bailey, was it Bailey? Was it Dina? What about Latia? Hmm. Curious names that he threw out there. Karolina comes back around and says, like, I don't want this to be a thing. Then he goes, it's seemingly on a witch hunt to try to figure out who said this. He pulls Rose. He says, did
I
you
mean, it
say
wasn't
this?
much of a. He figured it out right away. He's like, and that's the other thing. He's like, it wasn't those three. It had to be somebody else on a date. It's Rose. Now, I didn't go back and look at the notes. I didn't have time. But like, did everyone else on that date get eliminated? Like, how did he land immediately on Rose?
Well, we don't know if that's
Yeah.
an edit thing.
Sure. Yeah.
But he does confront Rose. He says, did you say this? And she said, well, I thought that's something I heard you say. And
Look,
then they,
there's a genius here, right? Okay, so the first thing, how do you know that she's lying? It's because she suddenly her speech gets very slow. She's trying to buy time. She's saying like one word every 3 seconds, right? Because she's trying to buy time to figure out how she's going to dig herself out of that hole. And she does manage to land on probably the one somewhat defensible strategy. So I will give her credit. It's not believable, because her entire speech pattern changing like that is an indictment and tells you right off the bat that she's hiding something. But she does land on a viable strategy. You know what? I maintain that I heard what I heard. That being said, I could have misheard, but I heard what I heard, but I'm not saying that what I heard was what he said. Prove me wrong. It's a great strategy,
and she
right?
sticks by it. Like,
And
I really
she
thought that
holds
that's
the
what you
line.
said. Yeah.
Holds the line. I really thought that's what you said. That's what I remember you saying. I'm not a liar. I might just have bad hearing. Yeah, great strategy. Honestly, like, how do you like?
I mean, spoiler alert, it worked. But then here's another. I mean, this episode, as I said, irked me in a lot of ways. Here's where I know I'm out on Karolina. So he goes back and kind of follows up with Karolina and says, "Hey, listen, I talked to Rose. It was a complete misunderstanding. She kind of misheard what I said, and like it's all cleared up now." And then she gets upset with him and says, you should have told me that this is what you were going to do, and told me that you were feeling this bothered by it, because now I feel like I caused the issue. And it's like, wait,
She
hold
has
on.
just shown him what every fight for the rest of their lives is going to look like. And I can tell you right now, that is not the fight that a man wants to have every time.
There was no winning. There was no winning. Him.
She put him in a corner. She's like, oh, poor victim me. Go defend my honor, right? Be a man and defend my honor. And then how dare you defend my honor? It's like, that is the rest of your life, dude. Do you want to be doing that every time there's a fight? I don't. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's going to get exhausting really quickly. Yep.
Yeah. I'm out.
So,
before we do get into the rose ceremony, there was one other conversation that I know that we both had a reaction to that I want us to revisit. And that was with Dina.
Yes.
So Dina like does a kind of a sweet gesture, like does a little promposal for Grant because, he's never been to prom. So therefore he's never been asked. And then they start talking about career, essentially. And she says that, she's very career driven. And he says, I've never dated a woman who was so success driven. And then she sort of says, well, I do have a life. Like I work hard and I play hard. But at that point, his eyes were glazed over. I'm shocked she made it through, honestly, given the way that this conversation went.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. One, you call it a sweet gesture. It was not a sweet gesture. It was an idiotic gesture. So there's so much here to dissect, and we don't have a ton of time. So what I'll basically say is that Grant has told you what he wants, right? He has been very clear, right? And what you just basically demonstrated is you are not what he wants. And you saw it on his face. The reality is, um, generally speaking, right? Overwhelmingly, men don't care about a woman's career. That is not what men are interested in. Sure, there's the exceptions, but generally speaking, a woman's career is not even going to be on the top 25 list of what a guy is going to care about when he's dating a woman. I know in modernity, we've got this women's empowerment stuff and go and have your career and blah, 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 blah. And that's great. If you want to have a career and be, a boss babe, you go and do that, right? If that's what you want, by all means, go and do it. But the reality is, if you want to date and marry Grant, you're not doing both. That's it. That's not what he's looking for.
That's not what he's looking for. I totally agree. I don't think that aligns, again, at all with his vision that he has for himself.
Truthfully, and this is something that modern women don't seem to want to accept. And that is actually not what most men want. And most what we consider high value men, they don't care about your career. They're never going to care about your career. You know what this reminds me of? Our Florida realtor, right? Mm-hmm. Awesome guy, right? He is this guy. He reminds me a lot of Grant. Big, super handsome guy who's really career driven, hasn't found the right girl yet, but he's so freaking lovable and so, empathetic. And every part of you just says this guy is such a high value man and such a catch. And but the reality is he is in the same boat that Grant is in. He wants a traditional wife. He wants a partner who's going to support him in his career, who's going to be a wonderful mother to his children. And that is becoming harder and harder and harder to find, for good or bad. And that's kind of when I watch Grant, that's kind of what I see, right? And it's so frustrating here for Dina to come up here thinking she's killing it, thinking that she's presenting this package that he's going to love, thinking that it's kind of like when Jen Tran proposes to Devin. It's you thought that was a good idea. That was so unbelievably dumb. And that's my frustration here with the Dina thing.
I totally get it. And listen, I hate the word boss babe, but I am
I used it a little flippantly.
Women that obviously is very career driven. That's something very important to me. Yada yada. So I'm saying all of this to say I know I don't take offense at all to what you're saying. I think that there are probably people that might, but I think the thing is, and this is where there's a misalignment here of values. I think Dina is wearing a lot of pride, as she should, saying listen, I can take care of myself. I'm independent. I have this whole life. I don't need a man. And there is something that is really liberating and empowering about that. But as you're saying, if you listen to Grant for 2 seconds, all he wants to be is a provider. He wants a level of a dependence or interdependence. And so that's not it.
You got interdependence. And this is the problem with sort of a lot of the modern, third wave feminism stuff, is that they present it as women are dependent on man. No, that's not how it is. Men have a function and a role. Women have a function and a role in the relationship. And depending on the nature of your relationship, these functions can change. But at the end of the day, you are a couple and you are each taking on very distinct and important roles. And when both of you are trying to take on the same role, it doesn't work. Right? That's not how relationships can work, because the reality is, if you're both doing the same thing, then there's something that's not being done. Right? And Grant is telling you that he wants to be the provider. He is telling you that he wants somebody to support him in that endeavor and be the person who's going to care and nurture and raise their children and make the home. That does not make it. And this is such a pet peeve of mine. That does not make his future wife somehow her contribution less valuable. It also doesn't make her the slave to him. What people don't understand. Yeah. And this is the crazy thing about feminism that I've never understood is, would you rather serve your family, serve your loved ones, serve the person that you chose to spend the rest of your life with? Or would you rather go and serve some nameless organization? You are trading, you're always going to be in service to somebody else. The question is who? And what feminism has basically told women is that you should stop living in service to your children and your husband and the people, your close loved ones. And instead, you should go work in service to a nameless, faceless organization and some random boss who doesn't give a shit about you. And that's like the crazy thing. Do you think men like going to work and work, basically, be indentured to, freaking Joe, the middle manager? Like, no, we freaking hate it. Like, and that's the crazy thing. It's like, we all work in service to somebody. I personally find value in my time, the stuff that the service that I provide that I find most valuable is that to you as my wife, right? Not to what I do and the services I provide outside of the relationship. And that's the problem with this entire argument and debate, is that people are ignoring the fact that you are always working in service to somebody else. Do you want to work in service to those you love and those you choose to spend time with? Or do you want to work in service to somebody that doesn't care about you and that you probably don't care about either? To me, it's an insane debate that we're having on a societal level right now.
The thing that I think we need to stick to is that having a shared value system and having alignment on what values are is very important to any relationship. And in this setting with Grant, that is very clear what he is looking for. And it is a more traditional model. And in that more traditional model, all of the things that you are saying make sense. We've met leads where they seemed to promote a less traditional model, and therefore they've essentially dated accordingly. And I think that that is something that people just need to get really honest about, is what their value systems actually are and why, right? And why those things are actually important to them. Like, I do think that people buy into a narrative easily on whichever side you're on, whether it's on the traditional side or like the or the non-traditional side. And I think you just have to have a really good understanding of what's important to you and why, and then what things you need to do in order to live into those values and find someone that does that with you.
On to the rose ceremony.
Let's do it.
All right. So we have the date roses of Parisa, Karolina, and Latia, all safe. We had a elimination of Beverly because she was sick and unable to continue. So we are doing 7 roses, and those go to Zoe, Juliana, Alex, Dina, Natalie, Serafina, and shockingly Rose, which I suspect was a producer pick. That means that the eliminations were Chloe, which obviously we all knew. We didn't even have to watch the show. We knew she was getting eliminated on week 3 just from the headshots in the write up. Allie Joe, no big surprise there, and Bailey, no big surprise there, right? So,
well, I mean, what Rose's inclusion really means is that he really didn't like these women enough to keep them around,
or it was a producer pick. Like, sure, I think that because look who's back. You got Zoe, and Rose, right? Zoe just creates drama with everybody, but she's got a little bit of a beef with Serafina. Right. Then you've got Rose, who's about to beef with Karolina. So if your production, or
somebody, yeah.
But if your production, you want to have at least 2 budding potential problems, because you don't know who's going to explode, who's not going to explode. So sure. Like, I mean, the problem is Parisa is unproblematic, right? Latia, unproblematic. Alex, unproblematic. Dina, I think she's too smart to get too involved in the fray. Natalie, too kind of sweet, right? So like, that's everybody. So these 4 are the only 4 that kind of remain that you think could, practically speaking, could create some tension and some drama. So if you're
Yeah.
production, you kind of don't want to lose one this early.
No, that's fair.
And I'm happy you asked about my rose this week.
Love it. My thorn this week.
I hated to see that.
All right, let's get into rose and thorn.
Can I just, I know it's going to be shocking here, but I do in fact have a rose. And so let's just get that out of the way before I just drop thorns galore. My boy Jack and his appearance, it was the only highlight of this episode. The only thing I enjoyed, him cooking them burgers, him just being Jack. I love Jack. Like that, he's a great character. And he is a character, but love him.
And your thorn? Or plural, thorns?
Yeah, I mean, basically, let's start with I hated the Zoe's kind of fake offense. Grant's lack of a backbone. The dates were awful. The wardrobes were awful. I had another one in here somewhere. It just the fact that they aborted the third date and tried to transition it and felt like they just gave up on it. Like, just cancel the date at that point, right? There was enough drama to go around. Give us more of the group date with 47 women in it, right?
Right.
So yeah, I was, there was not a lot to like in this episode is what I would say. So what about you?
Yeah, listen, I have a feeling I'm going to be critiquing Grant a lot this season. So I'm going to give him a rose tonight for his intentionality. Again, I like the questions that he's asking. Is he getting the answers? No, but it does tell me where his head is and what he's thinking. And so I feel like I need to give him a rose for, again, like the first question. He needs the follow-up. He needs to regulate himself better. He needs to, again, think about his own needs. Again, we come back to what his dad said in the first episode anyway, but again, he's very intentional. He's not bearing the lead in what he's looking for. I know who he is and what he wants. And so he gets my rose for that. My thorn, going back to something that we talked about earlier, I just don't like this idea of the girl math, the power suit. I don't know why we are doing this to ourselves. Like it just feels like we are making caricatures of like dumb women who need to dress in a costume in order to be taken seriously, or to be able to step into any sort of power is to dress like a man. I don't know. I just wish that women felt comfortable enough to own their intelligence, to own who they are, and to step audaciously into spaces where they can just be who they are and have that be enough without all of this performative aspect, while still dumbing ourselves down. Like I cannot hit on this enough. I hated this very much.
Yep. All right. I think that's enough for this week, I think
that is more than enough. Next
Take
week,
us home.
We are apparently traveling to Madrid. So we are getting out of Bachelor Mansion, and we will be back to talk about that, episode 4 of Grant's season of The Bachelor. But until then, you can follow us on Instagram at Reactivity TV. You can follow me at Amy Albero LCSW. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Again, we want to hear from you in the comments. We asked you a lot of questions this week. Let us know your thoughts. You can also send any feedback, suggestions, comments to our email, reactivitytv@revivecfw.com. But we will see you next week. Have a great week. Take care. Bye.
Is there a mercy rule in podcasting?